Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. I'm your host, Joël Collin Demers. This is episode 13, and today we're going to be talking about how to build deployment plans for source-to-pay suites with our guest, ConvergentIS. So really excited for this episode. We've got lots of stuff in store for you, but just before we get to the actual content, the banner at the bottom of the screen, you can see it. I talked about it last week. We are going to be releasing the first 5 tickets for the Procure Tech Unpacked virtual conference that's going to be happening April 22nd and 24th. It's 100% virtual. It's super cheap compared to going to a live in-person event. So I want you to make sure to get your phones ready because I'm going to give you an opportunity to get one of those 5 first tickets. And I'm going to do it for 50% off because you're a live viewer and that's worth something. So just before we get there, if you're following the show, we've done a bunch of episodes before the holiday break. ConvergentIS is our second episode back. And if you want to watch the replays, you can watch everything at the Pure Procurement Newsletter YouTube channel. So make sure you're following that if you're not already there. And we've got a whole huge lineup for you going into the month of April, all the way to the month of April. So just wanted to call that out. And as for Procure Tech Unpacked, it's going to be what I imagine a great virtual conference to be. We're putting it together with Connect House and co-hosting it. And so far, it's looking really, really good. And every week that we move forward in the design of the platform, et cetera, it's really interesting. And I'm really excited about it. So we'll have breakout groups where you're going to be paired up with industry professionals that have a similar profile or maturity as you do. There's going to be keynotes, workshops, solution demos from the vendors that you've seen so far on the regular season of the Procure Tech Cup, the Procure Tech Cup finals, and much, much more. So really packing those 3 half days with as much value as possible for you. So if you want to come, now is your chance to get one of those first 5 tickets at 50% off. So scan the QR code with your phone, fill out the survey, and I will get back to you as soon as possible on a first come, first serve basis on the date you submitted your survey to get your ticket. If you're, you've got a good profile and you're going to get value from the event, I want to make sure of that. So that's it for my housekeeping here. Let me just turn this banner off so we can get your attention back on the main event, which is the discussion with ConvergentIS, right? So we'll just level set on what's a source to pay suite, define it together, and then we'll get into the main discussion of how do we build deployment plans for source to pay suites, right? Starting with the bigger picture, source to pay suites have multiple modules, right? What are the different pathways to successful deployment? And then how do these successful teams deploy above and beyond just the plan? And then we'll wrap things up for you within the next 30 minutes here. So before we dive into the content, let me just bring on my guests here. So we've got Pascal Darc. Thanks so much for being here. So a 20-year veteran as a Procure Tech exec, a strategist and advisor to ConvergentIS, but you've also worked at Ariba, IBM, Jagger, SAP. So just to name drop a little bit and give you some cred here. So thanks for being here, Pascal.
Thank you, Joel.
And then we've also got Deep, right? You're a supply chain and P2P expert as well in SAP, in the SAP space specifically, and you're a partner and vice president at ConvergentIS. So thanks for being here as well.
Thanks, Joel. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, and we've got you sitting in Calgary, Deep, and Pascal, you're in the UK, right? So I'm the only thing standing between you and the pub, I think.
Absolutely. I've got a cup of tea for the minute, so we're good.
Very good, very good. So I appreciate you taking some time at the end of your day here. It is an international audience, right? We've got people in the chat here from Oslo, from Toronto, from New York, and I know people tune in from the UAE sometimes as well, right? So thanks for being here. It's not for naught. All right. So as we get into the content here, let's just define terms as seen through the Procure Tech market map that I bring up every week, and you'll notice that this week the whole thing is circled, right? So to me, a source to pay suite or a source to pay platform, right? And I think I've alluded to this in the past, right? We're seeing a convergence. Like next week, we have intake and orchestration solution coming on. And I think everything is kind of becoming the same. And that was one of my predictions for the year is we're getting these platforms that are going to allow us to whether it's an older legacy style source to pay suite or these newer platforms like ConvergentIS, like the Veneering folks we have on next week, to modularly give us the capabilities that we need across the entire procurement value chain, from spend analysis, category management, sourcing and contract management, all the way to paying your invoices and managing purchase orders and the supplier relationship, right? So that's how I define a source to pay suite. I don't know, Pascal, Deep, if you have the same view.
I mean, yeah, absolutely, Joel. And what I'd say, it's great to be here on this topic, and especially here alongside yourself and ConvergentIS. That word platform, as we go from suite to platform, I mean, it's undergone such a change just in the recent couple of years in our procurement profession, in what it means and how it changes the procurement operating model, and perhaps most importantly, the outcomes that we can drive. So, yeah, very much looking forward to this topic, but very much aligned with your definitions.
Yeah, and I hope we'll get to see that in action or in a bit more detail, right? Those additional capabilities that thinking in a platform manner gives you, and I'm sure we will. And I kind of know because I've seen the content before. But hey, but yeah, Deep, tell us a little bit more. Just, we had the first episode, which people can watch by scanning the QR code. They can also get a demo with you guys if they want to see what we discuss in action. But tell us, who ConvergentIS is, in a quick minute here.
For sure, yeah. Thanks again, Joel. So ConvergentIS is a SAP native firm built through decades of operating inside complex enterprise environments across ECC and S/4HANA. And Rio has emerged from that experience to address a core executive challenge, that how to add automation and intelligence without destabilizing the system of record or committing to a large and irreversible change. So Rio is designed as a platform layer. It's not a point solution. It sits over an existing system to add context, policy, and control before execution. Rio also has an API first, and it's modular by design, which reflects a broader shift away from monolithic suites towards the composable platforms that can evolve safely over time. And I think so that's the lens for today's discussions as well. Not a category labels, but how to design a deployment plans for source to pay platform that can scale safely over time. So that's what ConvergentIS stands for, Joel.
And I know, from having experienced your platform as well, that you said sits over a system, but it can also sit over systems, plural, right? In the sense
That's
where,
right.
you play in the enterprise space and in the complexity of, sitting on top of an SAP system, but also having potentially other ERPs within that business as well, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we have got customers who have got Rio deployed over ERP system. Definitely the choice is SAP, but also they have got other contract management systems or source to pay solution just for RFPs and RFQs, or maybe another third-party systems or ERP systems, maybe like Oracle or Infor. So we have got whole gambits of different integrations with all these different point solutions as well.
Very cool.
And if I may, Joel, I've been becoming increasingly closer to the team here at ConvergentIS, and they've given me insight into some of the upcoming changes. I've been sworn to secrecy, and I can't reveal too much at the moment. But what I would say is, particularly what I referred to earlier about the definitions of what a platform is to solve for what Deep has just mentioned. Well, you think about what customers have been asking for very recently. It's drive adoption through better user experiences. But what we've experienced and what I'm talking about is my experience across the market with general technology players, is that to drive great user experiences, you need to have that integration capability so that users and people aren't the glue between systems, and not just a user interface that looks great on top. And so one of the things I think would be a great thing you're going to see from ConvergentIS is that more native capability, because they don't just focus on user experience and business process, but the data model is incredibly important to the design and architecture of a ConvergentIS deployment. The other one I would say is people asking for more effective outcomes, and traditional systems aren't very good at unstructured data and conversations. So maybe I'm giving away a little bit too much, and Sean may come back and tell me off, but the future of ConvergentIS is to more inherently have AI at the core. It already does, but the way in which they put guardrails around it, so that, and I'm using Sean's words here, you don't have uncontrolled minions breaking things in your business, but you have them trained and with the right guardrails around them so that you deliver enterprise level accuracy. So these are some of the newer things that you'll see that's not on the slides, as probably as far as we can say today from a technology perspective, but today's topic's about delivery.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's funny you call that out, because I saw Sean's post, who's the CEO at ConvergentIS this week, where he's saying, do you have AI agents? Are you deploying AI agents, or are you deploying AI minions? And for anybody who's seen, the Gru and the Despicable Me series with kids, or yourself, I don't judge. It's the perfect image for an LLM that's going to hallucinate and cause havoc in your operations, right? So I thought that was really funny. But here we go. All right. So let's get to this discussion here. And if in the chat you have questions, we get them live, right? So you can type in the chat. I will see your questions and I can ask them to the team on your behalf, or answer them if it's a question for me, right? But we're here with ConvergentIS. So feel free to ask them as we go through this discussion of how should you think about building deployment plans for your source to pay suite. Last time we covered how to build business cases, and I think those two topics end up linking to each other pretty well, because to know how you're going to realize value over time, you need to know how you're going to deploy the solution. And so from that standpoint, Pascal, I'd let you lead us off here.
Sure. And Deep is the main star of the show that will get into the detail, but I wanted to start with what I've seen consistently in my past 21 years of being a consultant, then in delivery, then in product strategy. Within the deployment process, and when you're in the depth of the detail, the link back up to the executive reasons as to why the business case got signed, per your topic last week, and then how the delivery program is operated and runs. It's always important to make sure the right stakeholders are always keeping that North Star and those executive level priorities in mind, because I know it sounds kind of obvious, but the number of times I've seen as a delivery executive or a sponsor see a team get stuck on a piece of detail that is very important at an operational level, but then when you take a step back and remind yourselves why the business case got signed off, you can sometimes really just kind of break through some of those difficult choices or moments where you think it's unresolvable, and actually remember, well, there's different ways to solve a problem. So making sure people are constructively challenging why we've stopped or why we're making some of the more detailed decisions by relating back to the executive priorities and why the business case got signed off in the first place is quite critical. The second one I've seen of the three that I'll mention before I hand over to Deep is that you're seeing here a few examples of where ConvergentIS have seen some really established themes as to why they do projects here. You're also seeing some emerging and re-emerging themes, but the reality is it's usually a combination of these boxes, not just one. I mean, if you look at the tangible financial impact a procurement transformation can deliver, it's significant, but it usually sits alongside risk mitigation and the things we've learned ever since from COVID and before. So it's never just linear, and it's important that the right stakeholder groups are informed of the right kind of messages and not overwhelmed by the executive priorities. And the third is the pathway. So once you have that executive priority set and it's communicated, the way that you can deliver can be sequenced in different ways, can be made consumable, and could definitely, per your business case discussions, can be done in such a way that it unlocks the business case for the next step, which is super kind of unique in a way for procurement, because there is such an unlock of capability and benefits that funds the next step. So I wasn't going to go too much into these details. You'll see the pathways on the next slide, but actually Deep, who is of course the expert from ConvergentIS, will take us through a customer example where we dive into these topics.
Yeah, for sure. So can you just go one slide back, Joel? I will just
talk about, apologies.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just talk about a customer example. And as Pascal said, I'm the hero of this presentation. I will say that my customer was the hero for this presentation. Is that when we started the conversation with a customer, and our customer is a large distributed retail organization, they started the conversation with the business pressure rather than a technology. So they were operating in an environment, as their large distributed retail, where the margins are tight and the supply continuity was critical, and the complexity continues to grow across regions, suppliers, and product categories. At the board level, the question tend to be consistent, that how do we strengthen financial control earlier in the process before the value leaks? So how do we surface supplier, contract, and pricing risk before it disrupts operation or the revenue? And then again, the question that they asked from the executive level to us, that how do we scale the organization without increasing the cost or the organization drag? So what we were seeing is a broader shift in expectation, that procurement and supply functions are moving beyond the transactions execution, and now they are becoming a decision layer for the business. So that's why even the Pascal is was pointing out that these executive decisions, which are taken before even the delivery starts for a particular program, are the key in defining the value of the project or any technology that you are moving in. So it's a key point where we should start before the delivery even starts.
And that probably dictates, to this next slide here, right? Like what's the pathway to success, to use your term, right? But if I pose it another way, it's like I've often been asked, like, hey, do we start with downstream purchasing, procure to pay processes where we want digitalization, or is it more the strategic procurement, sourcing, contract management, et cetera? So I'd love your view on that, and if that question or that duopoly or is wide enough a lens, right? Because I think your slide says that, gives us the answer, but I'd love to hear you on that.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I will just take an example of my customer. So the executive at a customer, they believe that transformation works when it follows a simple principle, like control first, then intelligence, and then you can scale. And this slide shows the sequencing. So how they start, they begin with a financial impact, because the value has to be real and measurable. So by bringing demand, sourcing, and contracting under control early, our customer organization was able to reduce the leakage and ensure the negotiated value actually shows up in the results, not just in the reports. So, and once the spend is flowing through a controlled path, the next focus for them was risk and resilience. And with a clean supplier foundation and the better category intelligence, the leadership at that organization got an earlier signals and fewer surprises whenever there was a disruption happening. And then the organization was able to recover faster. And then they were able to scale further, because you can only scale further, and it makes to scale further once you have all these tangible financial impacts and the manage risk and resilience in the organization. So what the key point that I want to focus from a customer perspective is that any delivery of a source to pay solution or platform, they don't have to be big bang programs. They have to be a pathway. And as you can see, each pathway here is activated, it's measured and governed independently, with a value from one funding the next. And that's how end-to-end change get deployed responsibly. And that's the example that our customer is also doing right now to do that.
And I feel like they're building blocks, right? Where you give yourself a baseline capability for a given use case, and then to your point, you're able to layer on, so you can control it, you can gather the data to a certain quality, and then you can layer on risk management and analysis and more strategic type activities, right?
Exactly. And it shows on the numbers also, right? When they started with these tangible benefits and these pathways, it was showing a deployment was showing 7% and annual addressable savings. From the risk and resilience perspective, they were 2x or 3x faster from recovery from the disruption. So all these basically pathways give you kind of a roadmap to success.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So again, we talked about the deployment plan. So let's see where the real deployment problem is. And this slide explains why the sequencing we just discussed matters so much in practice. So most end-to-end programs do not fail because the technology is wrong. Right? They fail because the deployment is too broad, it's too early. We design for end-to-end value, but then try to deploy everything at once. And when that happens, three things shows up very predictably. So value appears unevenly, you will see that few use cases deliver very quickly and others take time. And let's talk about risk. Risk, however, shows up immediately through integration complexities. Then there's a change fatigue, right? Then there's a supplier disruptions. And then you can see adoption always lacks architecture, no matter how the elegant the design is. And that's the lens for what follows is how to deploy end-to-end capability incrementally in a way that proves value early and then limit risk and uses that value to fund the next steps. So yeah, this is where the end-to-end vision is not equal to end-to-end deployment. Like you're not deploying an end-to-end roadmap, but you're deploying each solution incrementally within your suite capability and then getting the funding for the next phase of that project.
Yeah, and I love that, right? The vision is one thing, the deployment is quite another. And how you're saying that, you know, it's all use cases are not equal, right? Because to the earlier slide around, you know, the 6 different benefits types that you outlined and different stakeholders that are married to those different benefits. Like if you're trying to please them all at the same time in the same deployment, right? Instead of sequencing that and giving yourself a chance to be successful, to build capability, you know, from those integrations with your backend systems before, and then focusing on those high value use cases so that you can fund the rest of something that has a potentially lower adoption from a user standpoint, and then get hockey stick adoption later on once you've got that base and you've got, you know, you're solid and you're able to fund yourself, is probably the way people should be thinking about this, right? Like find those use cases that are going to give you an outsized return with the least amount of people involved possible. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is where even the successful teams are deploying the source to pay solutions. So what successful team do differently in response to the deployment challenge that we just talked about? They don't deploy the platform first. They deploy the outcome first, let the platform mature behind the real use cases. And that mindset shift is subtle, but it's very critical. So you're not buying technology to turn everything on at once. You're using technology to fund the next use case with the value created by the last one, right? So in practice, what it really means is you should start with a minimal viable scope, not the minimal viable roadmap, as we were talking about earlier as well. So just so again, this slide is talking about the same thing. Like you start with a minimal viable roadmap, right? The team choose the use cases where the pain is obvious, as you were just talking about, and the impact is measurable. And the impact should be measurable with your finance team, with your audit team, and even with your operations team, so that they can see the results quickly. So those early wins then self-fund expansions, and instead of repeatedly going back for budget approval, momentum carries forward because the value is already proven. So this approach basically reduces the risk, it accelerates the adoption, and keep the confidence very high. And then it works whether the starting point is intake, it is sourcing, or the downstream. So that's where we are seeing the successful deployment.
Yeah, and I've you know, and it makes sense when you say it like that. But and maybe Pascal, you want to chime in based on, you know, the experiences that you've had on with different roles over the years, right? And Deep as well, of course. But there's this tension I find, right, between like we've got this business case, we've got these really cool benefits to go get on paper, right? And on the other end, we've got adoption, we've got users, right? We've got people that actually need to use the use cases, the system, the processes to realize that value. And if I was to maximize, you know, for adoption, I would make my deployment plan as long as possible, and I'd train each person one by one, right? But that's not good. And then the other, if I maximize for benefits, I'm deploying everything at once, all at the same time, as fast as possible, because I want to get those benefits. And I feel like the tension is, how do I get that balance right between those two ends of the continuum, so that I can actually get the value that's on the paper, instead of trying to get it really too quickly and failing and being one of those 80% of the digital transformation initiatives that fail, right? Is that the right way to think about it in your mind?
And Deep, if I may, yes, I think that it's a really interesting balance, and we're seeing a shift in that balance. So increasingly, we're seeing the barriers to entry to adopt innovative and great technologies that help to solve for more complex scenarios are within reach. But the mistakes perhaps that happen is, yes, you're thinking too short term, but you're also not selecting the right platform and thinking ahead about your target operating model, so that when you do these little projects, you end up in the right place at the end. So the right platform, as well as the right processes, target operating model, and what you think your policies and controls will be longer term are important. But you can't just start with a really big project that's very high risk, right? And I look at the questions. Amir has mentioned a really good one, right? The biggest problem they face with delivery, and thank you for your question, is mostly disruption from political instability and not being able to benchmark value and price due to lack of competition. Now, these things happen live and in the moment. If you're waiting a year or two to deploy your end-to-end delivery program, 100 of those situations could have happened, and then your competitors have captured market share because they've reacted quicker to you. So we've seen that shift to more of a stepped approach, but making sure you have that end design in mind. And the market seems to be shifting and taking advantage of those lower barriers to entry to be able to deliver benefit and adoption in quicker sprints, in my opinion. But Deep, how about yourself at ConvergentIS?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like what we have seen, that winners aren't the team that deploy everything fastest. They are the team that deploy the right things first and then in the right order. So that has been, I will say, the change that is happening right now with our customer base as well, while they're deploying Rio.
And while you guys are saying that, I'm imagining like it's focus, right? Knowing where you want to go, but also being able to like navigate, the hits that are going to come along the way, and keeping that North Star. And if you need to take a little detour, fine, right? But always kind of come back to that North Star and build the card castle, so to speak, so that it can support that brick that you're going to lay on top at the end.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So, and again, like this slide, this is a natural conclusion of the deployment approach we just discussed. What we are seeing, the distinction between the categories or solution category like intake and orchestration and source to pay is becoming less relevant. Not because the vendors are copying each other, but because the enterprise needs have fundamentally changed. The executives today are looking for a flexibility over completeness on the day one. They want a platform that can be leveraged incrementally and that support that phase growth, and also that align to how the transformation actually happens, not how the software categories were historically defined. So in practice, the question that executives today are asking us is that, is it like the question that they used to ask, sorry, the last few years was that, is it an intake and orchestration or source to pay solution? They have now shifted that question into that, can this platform now support small scope deployment today and scale responsibly tomorrow? So that is where the whole questioning has been shifted from the executive level when we basically pitch in the Rio solution to them.
Yeah, and and to me, when you talk about that, it makes a lot of sense. And then it's just like, hey, which software companies and platforms are going to be able to kind of adjust their pricing model to support that, right? Because if I have to buy, the full license for the full thing, and I'm only going to be deploying small use cases one at a time, right? Then the business case is going to be harder to make over time, right? So I have that thought. I don't know if you want to comment on that or no, but just an editorial there.
Yeah.
Well, no, I can certainly say from the experience of some of the companies you mentioned I worked at, a lot of thinking going on about it, a real struggle to make that shift if you're one of the bigger players. But certainly the smaller niche providers they definitely feel ahead of the curve in terms of these creative commercial models that allow for more interoperability. So yeah, definitely one to watch in the next year or two in terms of how that changes.
Yeah, and usually I wrap up with the exec summary, but you guys had one, so I said, hey, I'll throw it over to you this week, right?
Yes. So again, like it's again, we just want to come back to our what we have been talking about. It's not about tools or categories anymore. It's about how the organizations actually deploy and scale end-to-end capability without boiling the ocean. Like we start with a design thinking foundation where the adoption and control are treated as the same problems. And the most successful team do not rely on process diagrams or policy documents. They design the system so the right action is the easiest action. And the policy becomes system behavior, not enforcement after the fact. And from there, they move into a minimal viable scope. And the biggest risk in buying an enterprise platform isn't the software. It's trying to turn on too much too early. That the point that we have been discussing. And starting with one to two, three high value use cases allows the team to deploy quickly, measure the impact, and build trust by proving the value early. And each win is designed to fund the next phase. And finally, the scale happens through a scalable execution layer, and that is where Rio platform really sits, because a winning platform aren't defined by the features breadth, but by their ability to evolve safely. And Rio can definitely do that. Your core ERP and or maybe other system like source to pay will stay in place, but the complexity should be absorbed by the platform rather than pushing it to the user or to the core ERP systems or other systems down below. So the point is that the takeaway is very simple, that the category you start in doesn't matter now. What matters is whether your platform lets you deploy small, prove value early, and grow with confidence without any regret. From
Yeah,
that,
and I love that as a last point, right? Because I have the vision of like, how many times have I implemented a system where we then had to create swivel chair tasks or like supplementary tasks for people to do because we needed to hook it with another process, or we needed an insight that we couldn't develop within the platform itself without spending thousands of dollars, right? And so what system is also giving me a toolbox so that I can, they do those edge cases or, do ad hoc reporting or what have you, so that I can eliminate the need for swivel chair or Excel files to supplement what it is that I need to do as a business.
And those are the pains. Those are the main pains, like when business goes and develop their own Excel file because they're not able to do something on the system. Yeah. And then you're just looking for the change management, and then you're looking for how to get those processes into your system if somebody leaves the organization.
Yeah. But the implementation is over, right? Like it should all be in there already, but that's not how business works, right? So as we get to the end of the show here, I want to thank you, Pascal, Deep, for coming, for helping us have this discussion right on deployment planning for source to pay suites or source to pay platforms, as we've outlined during the show. If you on watching the show now want to keep following the journey and you're not already reading the newsletter, you get the invite for the show there every week, as well as best practice content, trends in the industry, etc. It goes out every Sunday, so you can scan that. And I know ConvergentIS, you also prepared a little asset for folks that are working on their business case, right?
Yeah, I've currently been providing inputs to help the team here not only provide benchmarks and help with the business case that leads into delivery, but ConvergentIS use their own technology, of course, internally. So there are AI and agents that will help map a customer's needs and context to the right benchmarks and try and assess the difference in maturity level that can be brought about by taking different pathways that Deep has suggested. So it's kind of a new way to interact with benchmarks and benefits. So definitely check it out.
Getting out of Excel, that should be fun. So thanks again, guys, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Everybody watching the show, thanks again for being here. I hope you're one of the first 5 that snagged the ticket. I'll be in touch. I'll go look at it right now and be in touch right after the show. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.